The pancreas is a soft, elongated gland consisting of two main functions, exocrine and endocrine. Now, the pancreas comes from the Greek word pan, means all, and kreas, which means flesh, fleshy organ. The pancreas sits somewhat horizontally and can be divided into a few parts: the uncinate, head, neck, body, and tail as shown. The tail of the pancreas tickles the spleen. Behind the pancreas sits the left kidney. The head and uncinate of the pancreas interacts with the first part of the small intestine called the duodenum. The beginning of the second part of the small intestine called the jejunum also interacts with the inferior surface of the pancreas. Sitting anterior and superior to the pancreas is the stomach, which joins to the duodenum. The liver lies in the right upper quadrant of the abdomen and is the source of bile production. Bile is produced and travels from the liver down the right and left hepatic ducts. The right and left hepatic ducts merge and form the common hepatic duct. The bile can be stored actually in the gallbladder, the organ just below the liver. And the bile can be carried out from the gallbladder into the cystic duct. The cystic duct actually joins with the common hepatic duct we talked about to form the common bile duct. The common bile duct joins with the main pancreatic duct here before entering into the small intestine, the duodenum. Let's take a closer look at this area and to understand a bit more about the common bile duct and the pancreatic duct. The flow of bile is controlled by the sphincter cholecticus. Pancreatic juices during digestion travels through the pancreatic duct and joins with the common bile duct. There's also a sphincter called the sphincter pancreaticus. The common bile duct and pancreatic duct will join to form the ampulla vata. The ampulla vata is surrounded by the sphincter papillae. The sphincter papillae, sphincter pancreaticus, and sphincter cholecticus make up what is known as the sphincter of Oddi. The major duodenal papilla is the opening into the duodenum. So just a reminder, here is the duodenal wall and here is the pancreas. So let's take a closer look now at the pancreas and its physiology, how it helps in food digestion, and in particular, what actually stimulates its function. Here again is the pancreas surrounded by other organs. The pancreas is open here, as I have drawn. Remember, when we eat, food is in the stomach and the content is actually acidic. And it's because the stomach is where acid is produced, and it really helps the first phase of digestion. Food then will enter the duodenum, the first part of the small intestine. When food is in the small intestine, the gallbladder is stimulated to secrete its stored bile into the duodenum. Also, the pancreas is stimulated to secrete digestive juices into the main pancreatic duct and then into the duodenum. The juices are produced from the acinous cells, which again produce the enzymes to help in the digestion of food, the juices. The common bile duct and main pancreatic duct converge at the ampulla vata before entering the duodenum through the major duodenal papilla. It's important to know there is an accessory pancreatic duct, which also has its own opening in the duodenum. Now, it's also important to remember that 98% of cells in the pancreas are exocrine cells, which means cells that produce enzymes, the digestive juices. And the other 2% are the endocrine cells, which are responsible for the hormones such as insulin. These hormone cells of the pancreas are found in clusters, and these clusters are called the islets of Langerhans, and their role in the human body is so important. Let's take a closer look at how everything works now. So here you have the acinous cells, which make up the exocrine function of the pancreas. They secrete enzymes such as amylase, lipase, and peptidase into the main pancreatic duct. And then eventually, the pancreatic duct will carry this into the duodenum to help with the digestion of food. The islets of Langerhans sits around the acinar cells and are part of the endocrine function of the pancreas, the hormones. There are few types of cells which make up the islets of Langerhans, and these include the alpha cells which secrete glucagon, the beta cells which produce insulin, the gamma cells which produce polypeptides, and the delta cells which produce somatostatin. Hormones are secreted from these cells into the bloodstream. And obviously, after you eat, insulin is the hormone that is produced by the beta cells to help store all this energy that we have just eaten. Now let's go back and see how everything is regulated, specifically the enzymes in digestion. So imagine you ate a meal and you have food coming down into the duodenum from the stomach. Here is the duodenal lumen, cells of the small intestine, and then the basement membrane below, and then below that is the circulation, the blood. You have two important cells in the small intestine, the S cells and the I cells. When acidic food from the stomach arrives in the duodenum, it will stimulate the S cells to produce secretin. Proteins and fats in the small intestine will stimulate the I cells to secrete cholecystokinin, CCK, another important hormone. Let's look at the function of secretin first. Secretin has several functions. One is to reduce bile production and secretion from the liver and gallbladder. The second function of secretin is that it reduces stomach motility and activity to get the small intestine prepared and to stop acidic food content from coming into the duodenum. Secretin is also responsible for telling the ductile cells in the pancreas to produce bicarbonate, and this is in order to neutralize the acidity which is now in the small intestine. Cholecystokinin is a hormone which main function is to stimulate the digestive process, essentially. It stimulates the acinar cells to secrete its pancreatic juices so it can digest the proteins and the fats which are right now in the duodenum. Also, it will tell the gallbladder and liver to produce and to secrete bile to help in the digestion of fat. Also important to remember that when we absorb glucose, it will stimulate the pancreas to produce the hormone insulin. Some clinical anatomy now is acute pancreatitis, which is acute inflammation of the pancreas due to many causes. The two main ones are gallstones and alcohol. The pathophysiology is basically autodigestion. The enzymes which are meant to go into the pancreatic duct essentially go everywhere else. The enzyme particularly are the proteases and lipases, which eat up everything around, causing inflammation and severe epigastric pain. Let us now focus more on the arteries and veins of the pancreas. The pancreas sits in front of the inferior vena cava and the descending aorta. The tail of the pancreas tickles the spleen, and the head of the pancreas is next to the duodenum. The descending aorta runs here, and the celiac trunk branches at about T12 to L1 vertebral level. The celiac trunk has three main branches which supply the organs around it. At about L2, another important artery called the superior mesenteric artery comes off the descending aorta and runs behind the pancreas and over the duodenum. Adjacent to the superior mesenteric artery is the superior mesenteric vein, which comes also behind the pancreas, but it does not drain into the inferior vena cava. Let's focus more on the arteries. So here is the pancreas. Remember the celiac trunk branches at T12L1. It has three main branches. The left gastric artery will supply the stomach. The splenic artery, the second branch, is a very tortuous artery and has some branches supplying the superior part of the pancreas as well as the greater curvature of the stomach. The splenic artery ends at the spleen. The common hepatic artery is the last branch of the celiac trunk, and it will branch off to the right and has many branches. It becomes the common hepatic proper which will supply the liver with oxygen, but also the gallbladder nearby. The other branch is the gastroduodenal artery. The gastroduodenal artery branches again into the superior pancreaticoduodenal artery, and this has an anterior and posterior part to it. So where does the inferior pancreaticoduodenal artery come from? Well, it comes from the superior mesenteric vein, which, if you remember, comes off the descending aorta here at about L1 to L2 level. The inferior pancreaticoduodenal artery also has the anterior and posterior portions. Some clinical anatomy. There's a thing called superior mesenteric artery syndrome. It is a rare condition in which the duodenum is compressed against the superior mesenteric artery and the abdominal aorta, or the descending aorta. Let's take a look at the descending aorta and the superior mesenteric artery from the side. Remember, the superior mesenteric artery is a branch of the descending aorta and goes over the duodenum. Right under the superior mesenteric artery here is actually the left renal vein as well. And then below this is the duodenum. Surrounding all these structures is mesenteric fat, which is really important in maintaining everything where it is. You can say it protects the superior mesenteric artery and the duodenum. So you can imagine if you become malnourished, resulting in cachexia, it can be due to anorexia or malabsorption, you lose all this mesenteric fat. This causes duodenal compression, which will essentially give symptoms of bowel obstruction. But when you think about it, superior mesenteric artery syndrome, the angle is very acute, and it can also cause left renal vein obstruction, which can cause kidney injury and also left-sided varicocele. So those are the important arteries to remember about the pancreas. Let's look at the veins now. Here is the pancreas again, and behind it is the inferior vena cava and the descending aorta. Draining from the spleen is a splenic vein, and this travels posterior behind the pancreas. The inferior mesenteric vein, which carries blood from the hindgut, drains into the splenic vein. Then there is the superior mesenteric vein, which carries blood from the midgut and also joins to the splenic vein. And together, the superior mesenteric vein and the splenic vein will form what's called the portal vein. You have to realize that the blood draining from these GIT veins carry a lot of nutrition. All this glucose, protein, will travel via the portal vein into the liver, where further biochemical reactions will take place. So these veins from the GIT don't drain into the inferior vena cava, but will drain into the liver via the portal vein, which is very important to understand. Now let's look at the embryology of the pancreas. You have the duodenum here. Here is your dorsal pancreatic bud, and then you have your ventral pancreatic bud on the other side. The biliary system, here is a common bile duct, will drain into the main pancreatic duct, which is actually where the ventral pancreatic duct will be. During embryological development, the gut normally rotates, and so does the ventral pancreatic bud. It will go around and carry the bile duct with it. The ventral pancreatic bud will fuse with the dorsal pancreatic bud. The ventral pancreatic bud will then become the uncinate process. The ventral and dorsal pancreatic buds ducts will anastomose, and this again will become the main pancreatic duct, and this will become the accessory duct we spoke about. And of course, the common bile duct here will join with the main pancreatic duct and drain into the duodenum. The ventral bud again becomes the uncinate process of the pancreas. Some clinical anatomy. Annular pancreas. It is a developmental anomaly in which a ring of the pancreas tissue completely encircles the duodenum. What happens here is the ventral pancreatic bud may consist of two lobes, which will maybe rotate to either end of the dorsal pancreatic bud, encircling the duodenum really. Annular pancreas is a cause of pancreatitis and also symptoms of partial bowel obstruction. Surgical correction is often required.